Friday is the deadline for the Justice Department to publicly release the Jeffrey Epstein files. This deadline was set by the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which was passed nearly unanimously by both the House and the Senate 1 month ago.
But with the deadline here, CNN is reporting that the DOJ is working to redact thousands of pages of files before they're officially released. CNN's article on the matter says a substantial number of redactions are needed. Quote, the documents each attorney is processing since Thanksgiving week can number more than 1,000, a time-consuming task that likely will come down to the wire. The sensitivities of executive and legal privacy, victims' protections, and other concerns all could play into the choices that lawyers must make when it comes to potential redactions. It continues, quote, the situation suggests that the persistent political headache connected to transparency for the Epstein files may not disappear with Friday's deadline. In whatever becomes public on Friday, sources said there will still be extensive amounts of information redacted, the type of lack of transparency that the American public may continue to scrutinize.
Congressman Khanna, one of the primary sponsors of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, posted a video on Thursday reminding the DOJ that the documents should be as transparent as possible, and he threatened prosecution if the redactions are found to be excessive. Take a look.
Let me be very clear. We need a full release. Anyone who tampers with these documents or conceals documents or engages in excessive redaction will be prosecuted because of obstruction of justice. We will prosecute individuals regardless of whether they're the Attorney General or a career or political appointee. We need full transparency and justice for the survivors.
Meanwhile, House Democrats on the Oversight Committee released another small batch of photos ahead of Friday's deadline. 2 of the photos show Epstein with several women whose faces were redacted, as well as one of Microsoft founder Bill Gates posing with an unknown woman. It's not clear when these photos were taken or where. There's also this screenshot of text messages. It reads in part, I have a friend, Scout. She sent me some girls today, but she asks $1,000 per girl. I will send you girls now. Maybe someone will be good for Jay. Again, it's unknown who sent the messages or whom they were sent to.
The New York Times, meanwhile, released its own article on Thursday, taking a deep dive into President Trump's relationship with Epstein. The New York Times clarifies it has found no evidence implicating Trump in Epstein's abuse and trafficking of minors. But the article still alleges that Trump was closer with Epstein than he's let on, and that the two bonded over their pursuit of women. It reads in part, quote, beginning in the late 1980s, the two men forged a bond intense enough to leave others who knew them with the impression that they were each other's closest friend, the Times found. Neither man drank or did drugs. They pursued women in a game of ego and dominance. Female bodies were currency. The Times goes on, over nearly 2 decades, as Mr. Trump cut a swathe through the party circuits of New York and Florida, Mr. Epstein was perhaps his most reliable wingman. Well, I guess we should start with the release of the documents. I mean, I think it's welcome that these are going to be released. I think the greater level of release, that is important. Obviously, we don't want victims identified. We don't want people's privacy breached in that way. But there's enormous public curiosity about this. I think some of the theories around Epstein may ultimately prove overblown, but he was a very powerful man who was a very wide-scale predator who got off very leniently the first time around and of course never ultimately faced justice because he took his own life second time around.
Yeah, and the DOJ could have avoided actually a lot of the curiosity if they had not slow-walked the release of these documents and forced Congress to pass this resolution. Republicans have tried to sort of weasel out of that by having James Comer on the Oversight Committee be doing these intermittent document drops to kind of provide cover for the Trump administration. But the reality is this was promised by people in and around the Trump campaign while they were running in 2024 that they were going to get to the bottom of this, and then they completely changed tack once they got into office, which has, of course, naturally raised speculation that there is something in there that Trump doesn't want released. I mean, that's just the natural conclusion that you would reach from someone immediately changing their tune on this issue. I also do want to say that I think the Democrats have done a few releases that have actually hurt their argument in regards to the Trump administration. And I'm going to pick on Jasmine Crockett for a second.
Oh, no.
I apologize. I know you're something of a
Jasmine.
fan, but she has been responsible for two, I think, pretty big headaches related to the Epstein files for the Democrats. The first was after the Democrats released that email from Jeffrey Epstein insinuating that Trump had met one of the victims. They had redacted the victim's name, and it turned out to be Virginia Giuffre, who had publicly said numerous times that she never saw Trump do anything untoward with any of the victims. And Jasmine Crockett did a CNN appearance where she was asked about why was the name redacted. And she said, well, I don't know why Republicans would redact the name. You'd have to ask them. Well, Jasmine Crockett, it was the Democrats who redacted. And she goes, well, I don't know anything about that. And then later on, she publicly insinuated that Trump cabinet official Lee Zeldin had received donations from Jeffrey Epstein, and it turned out to be an entirely different Jeffrey Epstein, who's a doctor in New York. And then the most recent release from the Democrats prior to this latest batch of photos had Trump with a group of women whose faces were blurred out. And so there was all of this speculation about who those women might be, and it turned out they were all, of age models who were like public figures. So I think that hurts their cause of trying to tie this to Trump if they do a release and then it turns out that the unredacted version of the release is far less damning than they insinuated.
The one of those examples that you said that I have most knowledge of was the naming of the other Jeffrey Epstein without saying it was another Jeffrey Epstein. And I would agree with you on that one, actually, much as I would defend Jasmine Crockett more broadly, because I think a lot of the criticism of her is unfair. That was not a good moment. That was one of those too clever by half things where you're being disingenuous and it doesn't benefit anything. To your earlier point about Republicans, I do think that a lot of the political negativity for this for Republicans in the Trump administration is of their own making. Yes. Because, there's Pam Bondi and the list's on her desk, it's about to be released, and then, oh, no, there isn't a list. It even came up in the Susie Wiles interview this week that has become controversial. So a lot of that is, I think, a problem or damage that they have inflicted upon themselves. Now, the Times story that we referenced in the introduction was very long and had somewhat interesting details, but had no real bombshell attached to it. And it was they'd obviously spent a lot of time going through these things. And to their credit, fairly high up the story, they did note that thing that it did not suggest or imply that Trump was involved in anything untoward. There was no real new information that came out of it. Will there be information in the files that are released? That obviously is the key question. There was a lot of speculation that time the email came out from Epstein to the author Michael Wolff, where he talked about Trump. Of course he knew about the girls because he told Ghislaine to stop. Again, that message exists in isolation. It's a pretty ominous message, but we would prefer to see the full context.
Yes, I agree with your assessment of the New York Times story. It's a story of color, right? It's trying to sort of define his relationship with Epstein, but the reality is the details in it are telling us what we already know. Trump was a dog with women. Not surprising, right? We all know this. And they had some kind of falling out in the early to mid 2000s. And this is just sort of providing more context to that relationship. They also released another story, though, earlier this week that I thought was interesting, which will certainly not dampen the appetite for this big bombshell, but it was a story about Jeffrey Epstein's financial history and basically how he got wealthy. And there's been this theory that he was perhaps blackmailing clients of his who were using these underage girls, and that was how he got them to invest their money with him. And the Times story suggests something far less nefarious, which is just that he was really good at convincing people to give him money even before perhaps the sex trafficking ring started. Who knows if that's really what happened or not. The documents, hopefully, the files will help us suss that out. But I think regardless of what drops, there's going to be immense dissatisfaction among the American public unless like Trump and Bill Clinton are going to jail, right?
Right. I mean, yeah, there's an insatiable appetite for more and more information. But I do think that hopefully the release of more documents will at least allow people to clarify to some extent what is going on here, including on the financial side, which is the subject of a lot of interest and intrigue. Meanwhile, the woman who was caught on the kiss cam at a Coldplay concert earlier this year is finally speaking out. Oh joy. We'll be right back after this.